Sorry about that. I messed up the internet. I'm Larry Beaver.
Sorry, seriously, I don't know why. The whole internet broke. Um, let's allow people to trickle in here and then we will get going with this continuation. Maybe it was God trying to save us. Do you think that could be it? I don't know. Anyways, let's continue. Um, I stopped it really quite right quickly, but I'll go back like a minute and or so.
They have friends. We have a community that's wonderful. I have a business. Andrew works remotely. I don't even know why. It's so illogical. It's not in the children's best interests. Sorry.
When you ended up providing therapy or setting up therapy for both Birdie, Uma, and Leo, correct?
Yes.
And you let Mr. Llewellyn know about that, correct?
Yes.
And did you ask him to contribute financially to the cost of that therapy?
Yes.
What was his response?
There was no response. He said, I think I'll think about it and get back to you. And then, of course, he did not get back to me.
Isn't it also true that he actually asked you to get them into therapy?
Yes, Andrews called Leo's school in January, or maybe I think maybe it was early February actually. And he said he wrote me an email saying, I'm very concerned about Leo and how he's doing, and he's watching Birdie too much. And, I called the school to check on on support for Leo. And I wrote back to him and I said, yeah, I agree. He needs more support. We are beginning therapy in a few weeks, and I'm hiring a nanny so that Birdie has more care because I work full time and Leo doesn't want to be around her after school. Would you like to contribute to these costs? It's not free. No response. No interest in who the therapist was, never asked me about it again, and only contacted her a few days before the beginning of this hearing on April 5th. And the first day of this hearing was on April 10th. And to this day, as far as I know, has never been in touch with her since.
How long did it take him to pay you 50% of the uninsured medical care?
Well, I just took it out of his account, out of that joint account that we have. And so I took it out of the account, and then he owed me like almost $2,800. And so we subtracted that from the $7,000, but then he still needed more money because he had to pay his rent. And so I just sent him his full rent amount, which then meant that he still owed me $450, which he just sent to me yesterday. And all of these expenses that were reimbursed by my taking that money out of the account do not include any therapy bills that are currently going on in May. So I'll have another invoice for him in a couple weeks that account for all of the therapy in May.
Has he ever offered to simply pay half of it as he goes or as you go?
No.
And when your daughter Josephine had emergency orthodontic surgery in the beginning of January of 2023, correct?
Correct.
And that was an unanticipated significant expense, correct?
It was $2,880, and it was totally a surprise.
And at that point, how were you doing financially?
Not great. I had to borrow money from friends through the fall to pay for plane tickets and fly back and forth. It was very humiliating. And I had recovered some by the around Christmas time. But again, it's like I'm recovering. It wasn't and I just paid for Christmas, which Andrew did not contribute a dime. Actually, no, he didn't contribute to Christmas.
So at that point, would you agree with me that Andrew was making significantly more money than you?
Absolutely.
And did you ask him to help pay for this $2,800 emergency orthodontic bill?
I did.
And what was his response?
He sent me an email saying I'm unable to contribute. And her orthodontic surgery was on January 2nd. He had been in Napa, California with friends for Christmas on a luxury vacation, I assume. And then in his discovery, he reports that he had snorted cocaine on January 1st of 2023, the day before her emergency surgery, which I don't know how he paid for that drug.
So needless
You're
to
such
say,
a
despite
bitch.
making significantly more money than you and you being in financial dire straits, he refused to contribute anything to the orthodontist to allow the surgery to happen.
Yeah, yes.
After Leo and Uma Birdie moved back to Michigan in January, and as a preliminary matter, you and Mr. Llewellyn agreed to a stipulated order on January 11th, 2023, correct?
Correct,
And you were represented by counsel to negotiate that, correct?
correct,
And so was he, correct?
correct.
And that stipulated order provided that the two younger children would live primarily with you for the remainder of the school year, correct?
Correct.
And it also allowed for a parenting time schedule in both California and Michigan, correct?
Yes.
And since the entry of that order, how often has Mr. Llewellyn visited Leo and Birdie in Michigan?
Once,
When was that?
January 29th to February 7th.
And how often has he seen Leo or Birdie elsewhere other than Michigan?
Since that order was entered, Leo flew there for his spring break on March 24th, and I think he came back like 10 days later. But Andrew has not seen Birdie since February 7th, and she flew with me to Michigan on December 11th. So he's only spent about 8 days or so with our youngest child, who's now 5. She turned 5 in April. He's only spent about 7 or 8 days, maybe eight days, I think, since December 11th. And she misses her dad.
How often did you visit the children in California in the fall?
I have to count on my hand. So I flew there in August. I flew there in September from the 8th to the 18th. I flew there from September 30th to October 8th. I flew there from October 27th to November 16th. So that's 4. And then they came back with me for Thanksgiving. And then I flew them back to California on November 25th. And then flew there again on December 8th until December 11th. And then we got the new interim order. And so then I flew back in January to do this house switch that we agreed to do. So that's 6 times to see all 3 children. And then 7 times, including that January trip. And then I was there in February to see Josephine and do that art thing. And so that's 8 total round trips.
Was that emotionally taxing for you?
Yes.
Was it financially difficult?
I think disastrous is a better word, but yes, difficult.
And why do you say that?
I just spent a fortune on plane tickets. Andrew at the beginning helped me, I think, with 1, maybe 2 plane tickets. Again, he makes a gigantic sum of money each month. And I had to rely on friends. My friend Charlie just bought plane tickets for me. And, I just paid him back when I could.
Did you have to borrow money from anyone else?
Yes, my friend Molly sent me $2,000 on October 27th so I could fly standby to see Leo and get there and have some money. I also happened to finally get a new project, and I got a design retainer the same day. So I was able to pay her back immediately.
Did you have any savings after spending all of that money on travel?
No,
Did you have any credit cards to rely on?
no.
Did Mr. Llewellyn reach out to you with regard to the time that Leo was to spend in California for spring break, concerned about paying for it?
Yes, he did not buy Leo's ticket until the morning of the flight. And he kept telling Leo he was working on it, which is code for I'm waiting to get paid because I live paycheck to paycheck. And then 2 days, I think maybe 2 days before, he wrote to me and said,
God, you're a bitch. I hate her so much. Thank you all for coming here. Make sure you clock in for your shifts, please. I'm sorry. You're all getting paid triple time today for this. Absolutely atrocious. But we do get to hear him speak today, thank God.
can you buy this plane ticket and I'll pay you back when I get paid? And I unfortunately had to say no, because I was not going to enable this constant financial mismanagement.
Did it surprise you that he didn't have enough money to even buy a plane ticket, given what he had earned and what you knew he was earning, since you had access to the joint account?
I wasn't surprised, which is very unfortunate.
Did it make any sense to you how he could have nothing?
No,
despite all those funds being paid?
to this day, it is a total mystery to me where Andrew spent $149,000 over the course of 8 months. He didn't even pay for Josephine's school tuition bill. He used her college funds and Leo's college funds to pay her freshman year tuition in Pasadena, and is now requesting from the court that all the children return there for private school. It is astonishing. And I added up things in the bank statements. I mean, there's a very large amount of just lavish personal spending. But even that doesn't, and then, he himself has admitted that he spends $10,000 a month just on living expenses like rent and health insurance. And in December and January, he didn't even pay the children's health insurance premium. And he said to me, well, in December, I tried to pay it on the last day of the month, and there was a technical glitch and the payment didn't go through. So, but you had insurance for them in Michigan. So I decided not to pay it in January. And then I got a new premium in February. Well, in December, you spent a fortune on yourself and you went on vacation. Why did you wait till the last day of the month to pay the children's health insurance premium? And then in January, you couldn't contribute to her oral surgery, which would have gone to her insurance. I submitted it to my insurance, which didn't pay for it. I don't know where all the money went. Not towards our children, I can tell you that.
Are you aware of significant tax debts that are owed to the IRS in the state of Michigan?
I just saw that yesterday. He owes $44,000 in the year 2021 alone to the federal government, and he owes almost $9,000 to the state of Michigan alone for the year 2021. And he filed those taxes after I asked him for a 2021 return that I thought he filed together, and they weren't filed, they were rejected. And then I said, okay, I want my own tax return for that year. So he went ahead and filed separately. And then I just saw that, I don't know, what is that? $53,000 for a single year in tax debt for 2021.
Are you able and willing to pay for private school tuition for your 3 children if you need to move back to California to continue to care for them?
I have no financial way to pay for private school for our children in Pasadena or California or anywhere. I have a business in Michigan, and my business cannot be picked up and moved to California to pay for private school. I would have to get a full-time job, and the salary range that I'd be looking at is between $60,000 and $70,000 a year, which would, be like a 1-bedroom apartment in Pasadena and little else. Andrew pays almost $4,000 a month in rent. That's $48,000 in cash a year. after you pay taxes for on a $65,000 salary, what does that leave you with? Like $50,000? I couldn't possibly afford anything with 3 bedrooms in Pasadena.
Have you looked at comparisons of the cost of living in Pasadena versus Traverse City, Michigan?
Yes.
And what have you concluded?
Pasadena, I think the comparison I looked at is 67% above the national average for cost of living. And Traverse City, I think, is 7% below the national average. It does not make any sense for Andrew to demand that all the children live in California when he can't afford it. He has no savings. He has $1,300 in a retirement account and lives paycheck to paycheck, earning hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash in a remote job. It's not in our children's best interests.
Do you believe that you would be able to go ahead and purchase your own home in the Pasadena area?
No,
Why not?
because the average sale price, I believe, is about 1.2 or $3 million for a single family home. Even if I was trying to buy a condo, it would be around $1 million. Any suggestion that I should sell the property here in order to live there? Well, Andrew would get half if I sold it before 2027. And so maybe that's what he wants, is to put so much financial pressure on me so that I end up selling, and then he would get half.
And if you got half, let's say you had $200,000 out of all of that, would you be able to purchase a home in Pasadena?
I mean,
Are you able to manage an $800,000 mortgage?
no. No. I don't have that kind of income to show for a mortgage broker. Like, I don't have the kind of income that would meet the standard of, basically that's a jumbo loan. No.
And do you have a credit card in your own name now?
I don't.
And so you would need to build credit, correct, to be able to even qualify for such a mortgage. Is that true?
Yes.
To clarify, obviously you and Mr. Llewellyn tried cohabitating in California, and did it work?
No.
You were asked on cross-examination initially about whether essentially drinking something or using something called a painkiller while you were at the Riverside Inn. Do you remember that?
I do.
And what is that?
It's the name of a cocktail at the Riverside Inn.
Have you ever abused painkillers?
No.
Do you have any substance abuse issues?
No.
Where's the damn oh yeah?
In the emails that I have reviewed, with regard to Pasadena, and actually I'll just pull it up. Give me 1 minute. Do you recognize this message?
Yes.
Could you identify it for the court, please?
This is a letter that Andrew wrote to me on September 1st, 2022, after the kids were already in Pasadena. And he is writing me another placating letter where he says he's open to changes, and according to other documents I received, he was not. But he does write in here about Leland as an option to live in and the pros and cons. you know.
I'd like to show you the rest of this document just as an initial matter.
Okay.
Is this a true and correct copy of the entire letter that was provided to you from Mr. Llewellyn?
Yes.
I move for this to be entered as Exhibit 68.
No objection.
Admitted.
In this email, or I'm sorry, this letter, he compares a number of different options. And he also examines Leland, Pasadena, or Ann Arbor as a variety of places that you all could live. Is that correct?
Yes, he also includes North Carolina and New York City and Chagrin Falls, Ohio.
And he acknowledges in this letter that your work is in Leland and it's thriving, correct?
Correct.
And he also says that the kids know it and have good friends there. You see that?
Yes.
And that there's a nice community of people and that your family is established there and could have a future there, correct?
Yes.
Do you agree with these things?
Yes.
And he also says that he has no professional future there. Do you see that?
Yes.
Since you've been married to Mr. Llewellyn, has he worked primarily as a copywriter as you described?
Yes.
And has that been consistent for many years?
Yes.
And
It's
is that what he continues to do?
Yes.
And he works remotely in that capacity, correct?
Yes.
When he says that he has no professional future in Leland, how did you interpret that?
Hollywood is not in Michigan. He wants to work in entertainment, and that's fine. He can choose to work and live in California if that's what he wants to do. I don't think that's in the best interest for our children. It would be nice for us to all be able to just, this was something that I tried to talk about with Andrew repeatedly, was like, what about what's good for the kids? Like when we lived there, it was like, as I've said before, we all lived in service to his ambition. And we lived there from 2011 to 2020, sorry. And he never sold a screenplay or a TV pilot or anything. That's 9 years. And we struggled. So I don't see why he's still,
Thank you,
why
Toby,
this
by
is
the way.
still something that our children need to be tied up in. And he had them out there from August until the end of the year, and Josephine is still there. And he still has not sold anything to my knowledge. And when they were out there, he was making huge sums of money and spending it on himself and still doesn't have any savings. I don't know I don't understand what his goal is anymore, other than just to continue to try and pursue the career that he wants and meet up with people for coffee to talk about, writing projects and networking. And that's fine. You can fly there and do that. When we moved to Leland in 2020, which we did together as a married couple and a family, he said that he would fly and to LA if that was if things came up that he wanted to go participate in. And since our cost of living was lower, we would have more money for him to do that.
He writes about one of the cons of Pasadena. The cons, of course, are big: the cost of school, the cost of living, which are almost prohibitive. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
He then asked you to change the divorce agreement with regard to the property settlement, correct?
Yes.
He then states to you, I brought many of my own problems into the marriage, mental and emotional health issues, an ongoingly unstable work life, a constant struggle to find peace and success with my work. It's all been a lot, too much, I guess. Would you agree with that?
Yes, unfortunately.
Are you trying to create a more stable financial life for yourself and your children?
Yes.
Are you willing to be flexible with Mr. Llewellyn to allow him to continue to pursue his dreams in California if that's what he wants to do?
Absolutely. Yes.
If you remain in Leland and continue to work in your business, are you able to support yourself independent of spousal support?
In Leland, yes.
Is it your understanding that Mr. Llewellyn would continue to earn the same money he earns now, even if he lived primarily in Leland?
Yes.
Are you willing to work with him in the event that he would prefer to live in Traverse City?
Yes.
Isn't it true that he presented to you a number of options about living in Traverse City?
Yes.
Are you willing to be flexible in terms of sharing transportation should he choose to move back here?
Yes. Absolutely. For our children, yes.
What do you believe to be in your children's best interest at this time?
Our children should all reside in Leland. And we can make individual choices about high school, whether it would be Leland or Traverse City West. Josephine will be driving in the fall, and so we could work out carpools and driving. I would work closely with Andrew to help navigate that. I think I think our youngest child, Birdie, should go to Leland for kindergarten because she has a lot of friends who are already in Leelanau, and I think it's a lovely, lovely community for young children to be together, and they would grow up together and it would be delightful for her. And they have long-term housing and activities. They have summer jobs this summer. I'm working on getting an agreement with my neighbor across the street who has a dock to put Andrew's Boston Whaler on it, and our kids could ride the boat to work and park in front of the library and go to the Merc where Leah will be working, and then Josephine works at the bookstore. My office is above the Harbor House, and Birdie's going to be with her nanny Tracy and also be attending Shady Trails Camp in Northport. And then for the school year, we can work out an agreement. If the older kids are in Traverse City. I mean, I would do anything with Andrew. I think I've demonstrated that I would do anything to try and work things out. And the reason we're here is because we couldn't, because I felt that his demands were unreasonable and they were not in the best interest of our children. And the reason I came to court is because I am here to advocate for their rights, and they deserve to live in a stable environment with friendships, a nice community, good public schools. Their school enrollment won't be jeopardized because tuition payments are late. We could save for college, which is around the corner. It's just like, and Josephine's going to be in 10th grade. Leo's going to 9th grade. Like, I just want to focus on their future, like go on college trips and think about what their future is going to be. And I'd like to do that with Andrew and have a reasonable way of raising our children that is affordable and positive and healthy, not moving around rentals. He doesn't have a lease past July 31st.
Thank you, Ms. Nicole. I don't have any further questions.
Final questions, Ms. Belden?
Yeah, let's see.
Aishwarya, you commented on you can't be away from your business in Leland. Is that correct?
That's correct.
In the fall, you spent some significant chunks of time away from it though, correct?
I didn't really have much business going on in the fall until October 27th, when I signed a new project, and just construction started on December 15th. And I left my business in the hands of basically a contractor, and I worked with the clients as I was in California on plans for the house that we began after I returned with Birdie on December 11th, and construction began at that house on December 15th.
Okay.
I managed construction.
Okay. So you just said you didn't have much business going on in the fall, correct?
Between September, October, and between August, I would say September and the middle of August, I was waiting on hearing about this new project with those clients. And I did have to wrap up that giant project in Leland that I had done the previous year into the beginning of September.
You also testified that since Andrew has moved to Pasadena, you've learned to be financially responsible and timely pay your bills, correct?
Correct.
Where are things at with the property taxes right now?
I'm on a monthly payment plan for them.
And how much in arrears are you?
We have a 2021 bill that is, I think, $6,000. And I think the 2022 bill is around $3,000.
Okay. And you're caught up with the winter?
I haven't received any current taxes for 2023.
Okay. Have you asked Andrew to be loaned money from Andrew since he moved out to Pasadena?
In the fall, I think in October or in September, September, he loaned me money via plane tickets. Okay. And he paid for my health insurance, I think, for August. And I think that I owed him about $3,400 that was, via things he had paid for. And as far as I can remember, and including looking through bank statements, like, for example, on October 8th, when I was leaving Pasadena, I needed money, and he sent me $250 on October 7th. And then I paid him back the following week when I got back to Leland via Venmo, and there are transactions for that.
Okay, so the money that you borrowed from him in the fall, I have that at $3,440 as of September 22nd. Have you paid that back?
I have not.
Okay. So, and I saw you referenced that was for health insurance, plane ticket. I also have car insurance and the High Point enrollment deposit that you were covering. Is that correct?
That sounds right, yeah.
Okay, so $3,440 that you have not paid Andrew back yet for.
Right.
Okay.
I kind of forgot about that. He hasn't mentioned it to me for some time, so I think he was kind of pressing me for it in the fall, and I just did not have the money. But I haven't actually heard any requests for it this calendar year since January.
Okay. Do you have any other? Are all of your utilities up to date with payment? Are you behind on anything?
My rent in Northport is paid. Utilities here are paid. My utilities at my house in Lake Leelanau are fully paid. My rent at my office is paid. The babysitter's paid. The therapists are paid. My contractors are paid via my business. I paid Charlie back for tickets.
So, previously you testified that you don't have homeowners insurance on the Lake Leelanau home. Is that still true?
Yes, I'm gonna be getting homeowners insurance before we move back, so.
Okay.
I'm
And
actually
then,
shopping around because it's really expensive.
and then, with respect to the rent, so in May you paid $2,800 for rent in Northport,
Right,
plus you are maintaining the home in Lake Leelanau, correct?
correct.
And you said that Andrew's rent in Pasadena is how much? 3,900?
It's $3,890.
Okay. Okay. And you're paying 2,800 for rent in Northport.
Only for the month of May. Previously, I paid $1,800
Okay.
between November and April. And then when I go back to Lake Leelanau, the house there's no mortgage, so I'll only be paying property taxes, the homeowner's insurance and utilities.
Okay. And the home with no mortgage, you purchased that home for how much again?
I gave Andrew a property settlement of $25,000, which he agreed to.
Okay. But when you and Andrew purchased the home, you purchased it for?
$449,000, I think.
Okay. And so you gave Andrew $25,000 for his interest in that home, and the rest is yours. I know there's some terms about how much you will get if the home has to be sold before, what did you say? It was 2027, correct?
Andrew has a first right of offer, I think, in perpetuity. And then if it's sold before September 1st of 2027, he gets 50%. And part of the property settlement, I waived spousal support and also child support.
Okay, so that was all considered in that you would not take spousal support or child support in lieu of getting the primary asset of the marriage, correct?
Right.
Well, I would argue the primary asset is your 3 beautiful children, I guess, but
Me too.
the primary property asset is the home. You testified that in October of 2022, I think you and Andrew both acknowledged that there was that Leo seemed depressed, correct?
Yes.
Do you remember on October 7th, or that Andrew purchased you a plane ticket to come out to Pasadena to spend time with Leo?
On October 21st, Andrew sent me actually, I don't know if it was, but he bought me a plane ticket for the weekend of October 21st to October 24th. And the plane ticket was for the express purpose that he wanted to go to Malibu with his girlfriend, and he needed childcare for the weekend. And since Leo was depressed, I should go out there and spend the weekend with them. And of course, I wanted to do that, but I had a very important client meeting in Leland with the Chatfields on October 24th, after over a month of trying to negotiate their new design project. And I think I showed this during our presentation, I had minus $278 on the week of October 16th, 17th, 18th. I had 0 funds to my name to get on that plane to spend that weekend with the kids. And I think he bought me a ticket for the week, and then he wrote to me, I'll move it just for the weekend so you can babysit them. I really want to have a couple of nights to myself. I've been single parenting and it's been hard. It would, be great if you could be here. And I just said, like, I think I said to him, like, I need more time with Birdie. Can she come back with me? Because I have to start this project. And he just said no. And I said, well, I don't have money to get on. Like, if I got off the plane, like, I don't even have an Uber car ride to Pasadena, let alone spending a weekend there. And you will have already left for Malibu for the weekend. And it just was like, so essentially what happened is I said, I can't come because I don't have any money and I have this meeting on the 24th. And so I went online and I changed the ticket to October 28th. And I went to my meeting on October 24th. He hired a babysitter that night, or his friend Barb Ray watched the kids. I called her and talked to her just to check in the kids on October 21st. He spent the night in Malibu, and then he came back the next day.
So Ashwarya, I just shared the screen. Can everyone see that? It shows on, it shows an October 19th posting that shows that Andrew with a card purchased a Delta flight, and the transaction date, which I think means it was the fly date, was October 17th. And that was for about $700. That was the ticket he purchased for you?
He bought the ticket on October 17th. And that transaction of 10/19, that date is like when it cleared his account. So, but the actual transaction date was the 17th for the 21st. And I wasn't able to get on the plane because I didn't have enough money. And I had a client meeting on Monday morning. I sold the project, got a $12,000 plus deposit, deposited it on October 27th, and then got on a plane and flew standby to see Leo. The following day on October 28th, I took both Josephine and Leo to a therapist.
So I'm sorry. So this ticket that he purchased for the 17th, you said you used it for the 28th to fly out?
Yes, and that's part, I think, of that $3,400 that I owe him. Maybe it's not, maybe it's
No,
more.
well, that email was from September and this was October. So I think that's separate.
Okay,
So
we
this
can
was
add that to my
another-
case.
Yeah, so this was another, so the October 28th ticket was that you
Actually, this ticket, yes.
was this ticket. Okay. So I think previously you said that you had your friend Molly give you $2,000 so you could purchase a ticket, but you didn't need a ticket, correct? Because you
No, I needed money. And
Okay.
so whether
Okay.
I needed money because my
Okay.
account was overdrawn.
Okay. I would move to have this admitted.
We'll just replay that a couple times because that's the gist of this case.
$1,000 so you could purchase a ticket, but you didn't need a ticket, correct? Because you
No, I needed money. And
Okay. You didn't need a ticket, correct? Because you
no, I needed money. And
Okay.
so whether
Okay.
I needed money because my
Okay.
account was overdrawn.
Okay, I would move to have this admitted as an exhibit, and I don't have an exhibit number on here, but it would be, can we do A1?
Sure, no objection.
A1 is admitted.
Thank you. Um, Okay. Would you agree that in the fall you were able to get out to see the kids? All the kids were living with Andrew, correct?
Yes.
So there was really no need for Andrew to be flying to Northern Michigan because all the kids were with him.
That's correct.
Okay. And you also acknowledge that Andrew was there in Northern Michigan, January 29th through February 7th. And then Leo was in Pasadena for his spring break for about 10 days, correct?
Yes,
You are aware that Andrew had a flight to be here or to be in northern Michigan for April for Bertie's birthday, and he was bringing Josephine with him, but then the flight was canceled, which like the morning of, which he was at the airport when it was canceled, correct?
yes,
So he had another flight that he was scheduled to be here, and it just didn't pan out because of a flight issue.
correct.
Um, you also testified that you had no financial way to pay for private school right now, nor any financial way for you to live in Pasadena at this time. But you would acknowledge that you're sitting on a large asset in Lake Leelanau or in Lake Leelanau, correct? A house that's valued at 450,000 at least, because that's what you purchased it for.
I would get half if I sold it, and Andrew would get half before
Okay.
2027.
So if you sold it for 450,000, you could roughly net about 200, let's say, after that would be on a low ball. To have those would be surplus funds that you could use any way you want, correct? There's no restrictions on the use of that money.
Yes, I would not choose to move to Pasadena with that money, though.
Okay. You previously stated that you really didn't have to do any marketing or anything in order to have the career that you've set up that's really been only going on for maybe 18 months in Leland as an interior designer, correct?
Correct.
It's all been word of mouth. But yet you're saying if you were living in Pasadena, you would be lucky to have a salary where you would earn 60 to 70,000, correct?
Correct.
You don't think that though via word of mouth, you could start up an interior design business in Pasadena?
The market in Pasadena is very different. It's saturated with designers everywhere. It means like everybody's a designer, everybody's a real estate agent, and everybody's got a screenplay to sell. That is how it is there. And in here in Leland, I kind of own the market, and it's just been really profitable and great. And I also have a growing business. I currently have 3 employees. I think I had 2 when I testified in April. I just added a 3rd employee, and I'm probably going to be adding a 4th one by the end of the summer. So there's no way for me to translate that to Pasadena in the short term. Of course, I'm a hard worker, and I would need to initially at least get a job for at least a year or 2, and I wouldn't be able to pay for private school or afford any kind of, decent home. And I think another financial sense thing is just like, if in the case I sold the house here on $200,000, like I would need to wisely invest that money. It would never go towards just keeping my bills afloat, just spending it.
So, Ishwari, you testified in from 2011 to 2020 while you were living in the LA Pasadena area that you were all living in service to Andrew's ambition for his career. Is that right?
Yes.
Can you outline to me though, when did you you moved to the LA area what year?
2011.
Okay, so you moved there in 2011. And at that time you had left Chicago. What had been your profession in Chicago?
Before we got married, I had planned to go to medical school. And so I have an undergraduate degree and then was taking pre-med classes. And I worked, I think, for a year after Leo was born. We didn't have any money. Andrew quit his job when I was pregnant, and I started working at a hospital. And so for health insurance. And so I worked in medical stuff. But I
Okay.
didn't, and then when we moved to LA, I actually became a science writer for the Children's Hospital immediately. And our children were in preschool and I worked at the Children's Hospital, Los Angeles.
And that's just like a doctor. So it's totally fine. And the same. Easier even because I didn't even have to go to school to become a doctor. Actually better.
In the marketing department and I translated essentially like scientific papers into press releases so that they could announce new research that was coming out of the hospital. And I had that job for a little bit. And then I actually sold an article to Scientific American, which is a magazine. And when I sold that article, Andrew said to me, wow, that's great. Just as long as you're not more successful than me. And I did some freelance journalism in science writing. And then, I'm sorry, is this the question?
Yeah, so I guess my next question is, when did you go to design school?
I went to design school in 2014. Actually, let me think. Yeah, in the fall of 2014.
And
And
how did you pay for that?
Andrew paid for my tuition and I only did about half the program. There were 20 classes and I took, I think 8, 9, maybe 10 classes over the course of a year and a half. And I did it while the kids were at school during the day. And then I had 2 internships.
Mhm. Were they paid internships?
Yes.
Okay. So is it fair to say that you were advancing your career path as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not comparable. I wasn't quitting jobs and losing jobs and driving all over and making reckless financial decisions in an effort to sell something that never sold. I now have a design career. Andrew does not have a writing career that he wants.
Okay.
I'm starting to think that maybe Megan does have a few tricks up her sleeve here because she's making this lady upset.
You mentioned that you felt Andrew wasn't approving of your relationship with your friends in Leland. You previously testified you were actively having an affair and keeping it hidden from Andrew during that time as well, though, correct?
It wasn't during that time. I had an 8-week relationship with somebody after Andrew moved to California for the first time for a separation, and it was a secret for a long time. And no, those friends did not know about that until much later on.
Okay. And were you drinking a lot with those friends?
No,
Who was watching the kids while you were out with those friends at night?
they were with me again as I testified. We didn't do a lot of going out. It's Leland, it's winter. It's, if I went out in the summertime, like my kids would maybe be at home with Andrew or, like out with their own friends. My children also have a large social life. But, I never left them in any kind of excessive manner to go drinking. That's not correct.
Okay. Okay, I have no further questions.
All right, thank you. Let's go off the record briefly here. We're back on the record on case number 2210869DM. Ms. Whitman, do you have any further witnesses?
We do not, Your Honor. We rest.
Thank you. Ms. Belden?
Yes, Your Honor, we'd like to call the plaintiff Andrew Hamilton Llewellyn to the stand.
Thank you. Sir, if you'd raise your right hand, please. Do you swear from the testimony you're about to give the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Great. Andrew, you've been sitting through this for a few days now. You can confirm that Ishwari is your wife or your soon-to-be ex-wife, correct?
Yes, I can.
And the two of you share 3 children together, correct?
Yes, I do.
And those 3 children are all minors at this point in time.
Yes.
Okay. Do you mind going through with the court what your academic background is?
Yeah. I mean, I sort of academic and personal background going back to high school, or how far back would you like me to go?
Yes, I would, that in furtherance of your career. I'd start probably with college.
College, well, I grew up in Ann Arbor. I went to Pioneer High School. I started college at Wake Forest University in North Carolina. I was a recruited walk-on the soccer team. We were a top 10 soccer team program. It was a bit much for me, so I transferred to the College of Worcester, where a lot of my family had gone. I had a scholarship there, sort of an overall academic kind of athletic scholarship. Majored in English, captain the soccer team. We were ranked second in the country. I met Aishwarya at Worcester. And then Aishwarya and I lived in England for a while. We lived in New York. I coached soccer in New York. I lived in Ann Arbor, and I coached soccer in Ann Arbor and applied to go to graduate school to get a master's in fine arts and creative writing. In August of 2005, I began an MFA program at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, Illinois, which is a regional university in Southern Illinois. I had a TA position and all my tuition was paid, so I had a stipend. It was a 3-year program. I was doing very well. In March of 2007, Aishwarya and I had broken up, but she told me she was pregnant, and we decided to get married. And she was doing a pre-med program at Loyola University in Chicago, and I had completed all my coursework at SIU. I just need to finish my thesis. So I decided to move to Chicago and get a job and finish my thesis. We got married. Joseph was born in October of 2007. I got a job in digital content with a company that made e-learning courses. In June of 2008, Aishwarya found out she was pregnant again. The recession hit us pretty hard. I think I was making like $2,100 a month. I couldn't really support our family. In February of 2009, I left my full-time position to start freelancing because I could make more money, could make like $50 an hour. Had a hard time, and then eventually I got a freelance position with an advertising agency doing something called content strategy, which is sort of a burgeoning field, working with digital content with like website redesigns. Freelance, I got a full-time position in March of 2010. My previous job had been $35,000 a year, and this was about 11 months later, and my salary was $80,000 a year. So I made a salary increase of like 105% in about a year. We wanted to move out of Chicago, and about a year after that, advertising agency that had offices in Brooklyn and Los Angeles contacted me and offered me a job. We wanted to move. We got kind of focused on Los Angeles, on California. We looked all over the country, North Carolina and Maine and Ann Arbor and Minneapolis, and we kind of focused on California. I remember New Year's Eve of 2010, we did vision boards, and Aishwarya drew this vision of a Cadillac Escalade riding through the streets of Los Angeles with palm trees. And we went in March of 2011.
I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry. Vision boards are good. Oh, on a good note, the meat turned out amazing. Bluebell thinks it smells great. She's just sitting there like, what the heck? And it's I've barely even touched it, and we've got all shredded up. What's on your guys' vision boards? Are there Cadillacs? Escalade? Okay, listen. I've driven in an Escalade. I like it. I've driven an Escalade. I like it a lot. I'm not telling you that I wouldn't like to have an Escalade, but it's not on my vision board. I'm telling you that. Wow. Wow. Seriously, wow. Let's let Andrew talk a little bit more here.
2011, I presented a panel at South by Southwest Interactive in Austin. And she and I went down there, and it was like 72 degrees and sunny and wonderful. And we went back to Chicago, and it was dreary and miserable. And we were like, we're done with this. If I get that job, we're moving. And I got the job, and we moved to Los Angeles in April of 2011. That job did not go well, was not a good fit. I got laid off about a year. Yeah, I got laid off in May of 2012. And pretty much immediately started working freelance, doing kind of two things. I was doing freelance copywriting. I was doing freelance content strategy. Earlier, like in March or February, I was starting sports writing too. So I'd gotten my degree. Was trying to finish a novel. And I went to just a reading of a website called Grantland that was owned by ESPN. I went to a reading they were doing at a bookstore in Los Angeles. I recognized an editor, introduced myself, pitched him a story, and eventually he picked that up as like a 5-part series, and that kind of launched my work in sports journalism, which I had no training in. So I wrote for like Grantland and New York Times. And was still doing copywriting and content strategy. I remember I went to a writing workshop in January of 2013 and met an editor of the LA Weekly, which is a weekly, and an editor of Playboy magazine. Sold an article to LA Weekly. I sold a feature story to Playboy, which I wrote and then they eventually killed. And sort of continued doing like content strategy, copywriting, sports writing. Wrote a feature for ESPN, the magazine, and would kind of continue to do that. The last piece of sports writing I did was for ESPN, the magazine. It was in 2015. They sent me to Paris to profile a female soccer player who was German, but she was like a Kosovo refugee, and she was Muslim, and there'd just been a terrorist attack. It wasn't the big one in November. It was at the Charlie Hebdo newspaper, because she had been there. ESPN sent me there to Paris to profile her. So I wrote that story. And that was published. And then around that time, video and stuff. So in 2015, I started pursuing screenwriting. I did a program at UCLA. Then I got published in Deadline, which is like an industry trade publication. So I had a bunch of production companies and agencies requested. I got close with one, everybody passed. Had another script that was out with some production companies that got passed on. Had another script that was out with some production companies that got passed on, kind of the way it goes. And then continued to kind of do content strategy, copywriting. I worked at the NFL for a while in their media department. And then had a podcast I created that almost was sold to Stitcher and Westwood One and Spotify. That got passed on. Had another nonfiction book proposal I got passed on. And so it's kind of always been like a combination of those things: copywriting, content strategy, screenwriting, sports writing. And that's sort of what I continue to do to this day.
Okay. And you have historically been the primary breadwinner for your family, correct?
Correct.
Quite honestly, you've always been the breadwinner for your family, correct?
Yeah, I mean, there were times where I sure made, worked part-time and made some money, but yeah, I mean, pretty much I was the sole breadwinner.
Okay. So you just went through that career history. You talked about multiple things that came to you basically from your proximity to LA. Do you feel like that's still a benefit to you to be in that LA area to gain that benefit?
Yeah, it's a tremendous benefit. I mean, just even reflecting on, an email that was just shared about me saying I don't have a professional future in Leland. What I mean by that is I don't have any tangible professional reason. Like, I have no tangible professional reason to be there. And that's not to say I didn't. I did some work with the National Writer Series. I taught at like College for Kids at Northern Michigan College. There's a tech school where I lectured to like a writing studio there. So I did do some stuff in Traverse City, but there was no like meaningful connections. And all the connections that, it's all the connections like Los Angeles, it's just like just meeting people, like I saw in February, I was at a track meet and saw the father of a child that our kids went to preschool with, and he's a producer. So I am in touch with him. Like I have, I've friends of a friend who's a writer. I went to, his book launch, and so saw people there that I know. I have friends who write for TV shows and write books, and I have friends from UCLA who have production companies. And so, it's very much a business of whether it's, I've done journalism, I've done nonfiction, I've done fiction, I've pursued screenwriting, but it's very much like a personal connection thing that just kind of happens by being in proximity. And most of the way I always say I built my career in Los Angeles, it was from meeting people through going to events, going to workshops, going to readings, just being physically present and going to those things. And that's how those opportunities have developed. Same thing with advertising work, before there's a lot's been made of me working remotely, but since the pandemic, most people work remotely. We're all sitting here on Zoom in this capacity. So I think the term working remotely is that it's sort of, it has different meanings. I work for myself and I work sort of out of my house, and that's what I've done. Prior to the pandemic, for the most part, if I was working with an advertising agency, I was on site, and that was also through, something that I did through connections. So yeah, every meaningful professional opportunity that I've ever gotten in my career has been from living in Los Angeles and making personal connections, and that's how I've built the career that I have. Okay. I mean, so when I was doing sports writing, I would go down, like the LA Galaxy is here, so I'd go interview players for the LA Galaxy, or international soccer teams would come, so I could go do stories about international soccer teams. I could go interview people from the U.S. soccer team. Like I pitch stories about people from the Lakers, so I go, meet people from the Lakers. Like everybody's here. So yeah, it's pretty crucial, and has been, and that's where I built my career. So it's kind of continued to be that way.
Okay. And you said in 2010, you had this opportunity where you bounced up your income from 35,000 to 80,000. And that was a big step up. And then from that, then you took a job with an advertising agency that moved you to LA in April of 2011. What was that? What did that income bring you for that move to LA?
105,000.
Okay.
And I will say, like, part of the reason that I was pursuing the work that I was pursuing in Chicago is because we wanted to move. And I knew that I would need a job to do that. So I had a job in a profession that would allow me to get a job elsewhere. And that's what happened. And we wanted to move out of Chicago when this opportunity came up. And that's how we moved our family.
So, what does your income look like these days? In the past 5 years, what is your average income?
I think the average, it's usually up around like, 175,000.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think, part of the reason I will say that, I do copyright and I do content strategy, but I've somewhat hit sort of a ceiling in what I'm doing. Like I've kind of been sometimes I make more, in a given year, but in terms of my hourly rate, it's been the same, I think actually since like 2015. Like I've kind of hit a ceiling. And so in order to, grow my income, it's really necessary for me to get other kinds of work going on, which is a large part of, why I was living here, and, had found a way to do that.
Okay. Can you walk us through Aishwarya's career history since you were married?
Yeah, so when we got married, she was working in research in Chicago and taking pre-med classes at Loyola University, which she continued to do through 2008. She also she started an at-home baking company. You know, and I do want to caveat this by saying, you know, saying a couple things. One is I've always believed in Aishwarya's abilities and her talents, and I still do. She's an extremely talented interior designer. Has always been a very talented sort of artist and creative person. You know, and her motion, there's this line in her motion from November 9th that says our marriage is characterized by, it says, I just want to read it. Parties, marriage has been characterized by plaintiff being unable to control his anger, resulting in horrible screaming and yelling. I still don't really understand what that means. I don't know how marriage is characterized by that in that way. I would characterize our marriage by us being devoted parents to our children. You know, we had two children. We had two kids before we had been married for 2 years. We were devoted to them and to their lives, to their educations. We were each supportive of one another's careers. And I was supportive of me, and I was supportive of her. And a lot of times that meant me committing money to support her. So she started an at-home baking company in 2008. I think we used like $2,000 or so from a college fund that I'd left over to start that. That didn't really work out because it just logistically wasn't working. She started working again in research at a hospital in Chicago, and then was working in research at Northwestern, which she did from 2010 to 2011. No, 2009 to 2010. We had two young kids. You know, Leo at that time was a year, Josephine was 2.5, and it just was kind of chaotic. We had babysitters and stuff, and so we decided, my recollection is mutually, that she would not work and stay home with the kids and take classes, pre-med classes, because she's still planning to go to medical school. She continued to do that through like the end of 2010. I think once she took organic chemistry with two little kids, like it just kind of proved to be too much. 2011, she started pursuing copywriting, and when we moved to Los Angeles in April 2011, and in the fall, the other thing about Aishwarya is whenever she pursues something, like she tends to get it. So like I remember she was like, I'm going to cold call people, and she called Children's Hospital Los Angeles, and they were like, yeah, we have a job for you, and they hired her, and she worked as a writer in the marketing department. We sent our kids to preschool. She did that through the beginning of 2012. She was sort of laid off or fired. I remember it was a really ugly situation that was extremely painful for her. She did sell the story to Scientific American. She kind of wanted to continue pursuing writing. I remember she took a writing workshop in 2012 that I paid for. In the fall of 2012, she thought she might want to work and like start a bakery, I think. And she got a job working at sort of a bakery market, sort of this prominent bakery market called Jones on 3rd in West Hollywood. It's a place for like Tom Cruise and Reese Witherspoon order their Christmas cakes for people. That didn't go well. Again, was let go, and that was very painful. And then the summer of 2013, she started taking art classes. She was interested in art. Again, I paid for those. And then in the fall of 2013, I believe the woman who owned our children's Montessori school was considering selling it, and Aishwarya put together a business plan to like buy and run the Montessori school, even though she had no training in running a Montessori school. That kind of coincided with a mental health crisis that she had. And, you know, to be honest, and I don't need to get into this right now, but, you know, coming out of that mental health crisis, like I knew her family and I knew what had gone on. And I felt that nobody in her family had provided her appropriate support or encouragement. And I decided that I was going to do that. And I was going to help her. Like I wanted to support her because she was talented and she deserved support. She looked at MFA programs in like fine arts and felt like, it was a lot of work to get into them. They were expensive. There wasn't a career path. She then looked at two programs. UCLA has an extension school, and she looked at two programs. One was architecture, landscaping, and one was interior design. We went to open houses for both of them. I know I went to the architectural landscaping one. I don't know if I went to the interior design one, and she decided to pursue that. So she started the interior design program at UCLA in the fall of 2014, and I paid the tuition for that. She continued, I believe they were night classes. Maybe she had day classes. My memory is they were night classes. She continued that through 2015. Again, she's like, I want to get an internship. She secures an internship with this woman, Windsor Smith, who is like a high-end, very successful interior designer who does work for like Gwyneth Paltrow and Ryan Murphy, who's a big showrunner out here. And I sure had an internship with Windsor Smith. She continued classes at UCLA through the summer. And then I do think I said, we enrolled Josephine in private school, and I was like, we kind of need you to make money. And she took an internship at Pogan Pole, which is like a high-end kitchen design firm in West Hollywood, and was doing really well and liked it. And my recollection is they were basically going to offer her a job. There was another instance where in the fall of 2014, Caltech basically was contacted her about working as a writer in the Alumni Affairs Department. And pretty much, I think it offered her a job. I remember I was flying back from Michigan. My father was dying of cancer. I'd gone to New York for work. Flew through Michigan, saw my mom and my dad, and I got back. I was on the bus, and Shorty wrote me an email saying, I'm not taking that job, and then took like $2,000 out of our savings account to pay her UCLA tuition. So 2015, Pogan Pole, I believe, was pretty much going to offer her a job, but she was commuting a lot. We were living in Los Angeles. We'd enrolled Josephine in High Point in Pasadena. And so she would drive, and I was commuting to El Segundo, which is like an hour and 15 minutes south, and we were all over the place. And she would drive Leo to school, drive Josephine to school, drive to West Hollywood for work, and it was just a lot. And she decided that she wasn't going to take the job. She was going to work for herself as an interior designer. She got a project with designing the bathroom for a friend of ours in Pasadena. And that kind of how she started working for herself. My recollection is her goal was to earn $15,000, or basically enough money to send one of our kids to High Point. But the friend paid her $1,000 for the bathroom, and she never earned anything more than that, I don't think. Then I started this company, Coaching Soccer, which was a disaster. I sure spoke to that, and I can speak to that more as well. And then in the fall of 2016, we were going to be gifted all this money by my mother from just to clarify what that was, my father died of cancer in February of 2015. He had a bunch of money saved, and he had these two life insurance policies, and $2 million life insurance policies in place when he died. He was 65 when he died. And after kind of everything settled down and my brother worked on the estate, it was like my mom was going to have plenty of money to live off of through the end of her life. And she was advised by her attorney and her financial advisor to gift my brother and I $750,000 out of these $2 million life insurance policies that my dad had in place. She gifted us $650,000 in October of 2016. And Aishwarya had been talking about finishing the program at UCLA, which she kind of just spoke to earlier this afternoon. And so I suggested that she use some of the money for some professional pursuit, and I figured it would be the program. Instead, she told me she wanted to open a grocery store. And I was not supportive of that because she'd never worked in a grocery store or run a grocery store or worked in brick and mortar or anything. She wanted to invest $50,000 in it. We fought we got in a huge fight about it. I'd also like to kind of point out, she testified earlier that she acquiesced to my anger. That is not true. We've never made a major milestone life decision based on pretty much anything I want, where we want to live, where we send our kids to school. I was generally the one who acquiesced to her anger. She threatened to divorce me, and eventually I agreed to it. give her $50,000 to open this store. She had a business plan. She was working hard on it. Part of the calculation, though, was I was in the process of buying the house in Pasadena, which was a financial stretch. And I said, if we buy the house, I will pay the mortgage, but you need to pay for the kids to go to private school. And we'd organized our life around the kids being in private school. They were at High Point. That's what Aishwarya wanted. She wanted to live in Pasadena, so to kind of like orient our kids' life around this school. And I said, if we buy the house, I need you to pay for school. And she said, okay. So we put $50,000 into the business. I signed on as the guarantor of her lease. It was a $5,000 a month 5-year lease. So it was a $300,000 lease. Very short. I had a full-time job that I got laid off from. Very shortly after she signed that lease, she found out she couldn't open a grocery store because of zoning issues. She decided to open a home decor store. That never, the store failed. And so we lost the $50,000 that we put into it, and she never paid school tuition. I paid about $19,000, so I would say we lost. That loss was about $70,000 in money that we never recovered from in Pasadena. She closed the store in 2018, and she did do some small projects. She got projects coming out of that store. But again, I want to point out her motion says she worked part-time when we lived in Pasadena. Her combined income from the 4 years we lived in Pasadena, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, was, I believe, negative $45,000. So that's an average of negative $11,000 a year for the 4 years we lived there. And she, wanted to try and pursue work. We had Birdie. She did some part-time work for an architect, but never, she got a design project with a friend in Pasadena. That was going on. Then we moved to Leland. She wasn't working. She took art classes, and then she worked part-time as a sub at the school. At Leland Public School, she worked part-time, sort of on a short-term basis at 9 Bean Rose. That's what she was doing when she filed for divorce. And then, in August of 2021, she wasn't really marketing herself. Everybody, because she had friends and she was in town, it's a small community, everybody knew she was an interior designer. So in August of 2021, our realtor who sold us our home in Leland contacted me and said, we have a client who is probably going to buy a house in Leland. They're looking for an interior designer. And can I refer Aishwarya? And I did pause a few days because she had just filed for divorce. We were fighting horribly, and I wasn't feeling tremendously magnanimous. But I said, I said, do you want me to refer? I asked her, I said, do you want me to refer you to John? She said yes. And obviously he did. And she got this project in October of 2021. And it turned out that people in the house were like billionaires. And that's what launched her business in Leland, which is what she's been doing since October of 2021.
Okay.
Wake up, Meg. Come on now. Good night, Lauren.
Okay, and so and to summarize, then when you were married, you moved to Chicago for what reason, Andrew?
Because we had decided to have the baby. We decided to get married. My dad did kind of give us this ultimatum, but we decided to get married. And, I was living in Carbondale, Illinois, which is not a wonderful place to live. And I had a year left in school. And so, it seemed like if one of us was going to make a change, that it would be me. So I did that to try and make, our marriage work and get a job and provide for my family.
Okay.
But the job that I got was not what was not the career track that I was on. It was a deviation from that.
None of this is normal for court. It's not normal. It never was normal. I said that at the get-go. It's not. Dinner, on the other hand, is getting very close to being done. The meat is done. The filling part is done. The enchilada sauce is done. The cheese needs to be grated. The tortillas need to be taken out, and I need to decide how I'm going to assemble them. I'm so thankful you guys are here. I, I this was a, I can see why they ended up together. They're both very wordy. And this is coming from a lady who live streams from her kitchen every night for hours and hours on end. So, it's crazy when.
I don't know exactly where I would have gone if I'd stayed in school. I was going to apply for fellowship programs, but I was not going to do what I pursued.
Okay. And Ashwarya was in Chicago taking pre-med classes at that time.
He was in Chicago taking pre-med classes.
Okay. When you brought up that you were looking at that first kind of career job opportunity that could take you out of Chicago, you said that they had offices in LA and in Brooklyn. How did you and Ashwarya decide on LA? I know you talked about the weather. Was there any reason that Brooklyn was off the table?
I mean, my recollection was, Ashwarya grew up in Connecticut and New York, and doesn't get along with her family. She has a very contentious relationship with her mother, who at the time was living with her sister, so Ashwarya's aunt in Connecticut. Ashwarya had another aunt who'd been very close to her when she was younger, but came out that she had done some, when Ashwarya's father died in the fall of 2001, and came out that Ashwarya's aunt had done some shady things with her father's business and to her mother. And so in June of 2008, I think she actually wrote to her on her wedding anniversary. I think that was the last time they had contact. And so Ashwarya didn't want to be around her family. She didn't want to be in New York. She didn't want to be around her mother or aunts, or her brother was living in New York at the time. She didn't want to be around her family. So we moved to Los Angeles. That was a big factor.
Okay. How did you and Ashwarya make the decision to move to Northern Michigan in the summer of 2020? Was that a joint decision?
Well, I mean, it was, I mean, I touched on it, like the move to Michigan was related to the move to Pasadena, as I see it. We were living in Los Angeles. We had enrolled our children in a private school in Pasadena that Ashwarya loved. And it was like she had friends there, and we saw a future for the kids there. I didn't actually particularly want to live in Pasadena, but, it was close to the kids' school, and she wanted to do it. And so I was like, okay, we were going to be gifted this money. I actually had some serious reservations about being gifted the money, but I felt like, it was in the best interest of our children to buy a home. The plan that we had, that we talked about, was that we were going to buy a house, and Ashwarya was going to decorate it and use the photos for her interior design business. But when we got gifted the money, she decided she wanted to open a grocery store. And so I ended up buying the house on my own. And it was actually one of the major disappointments. I wanted to buy a house with Ashwarya. I remember in the sort of escrow process, my mortgage broker said, can she get on the loan? Because my credit wasn't great. And I called her and I said, do you want to get on the loan? She said, no, my credit's terrible because I have these loans from student loans in Chicago and my credit's awful, which she'd never told me about before. So I bought the house. My name was on the title, and she opened a grocery store. And it was really quite painful to me that this thing that I thought we were going to do together never materialized. And it became me buying a house that we loved. I remember we walked into the house. It's by the Rose Bowl. It's this historic Victorian home, and we all immediately felt like this is our home. And we were able to buy it. Then we got a historical designation on it, which meant that the property taxes were actually 70% of what they should have been. So the home value was over $1 million, but the property taxes, the assessed property taxes were like $350,000. So we had this huge property tax savings. Our children were thriving at school. I remember like I would take my kids to school every day, and I had this tree, my lucky oak tree, and I'd like stand under this oak tree and say a prayer that I was grateful to God for our home and our children's lives. And when I was working, like I was grateful to be able to give this to our children. But it was difficult. Like it was financially, it was a stretch. I was commuting, for 2 of the 3 years like we lived there, I was commuting like, 2.5, 3 hours a day. Shorey was home alone. She was with 3 kids. Like it was a lot. And, we shared sort of this vision, this kind of dream of Northern Michigan. We started going, I went to Northern Michigan my whole life. My great grandparents built a cottage on Lake Bel Air. And my dad grew up going there. I grew up going there. Shorey, first time she went was in 2004, and we just like fell in love with Northern Michigan. And then my parents bought a house on Old Mission, and in a subdivision, based villa subdivision. And we got to be friends with. It was just like it never made. I was like, I don't know if we can live up there, but we met people and were like, oh, this is what your life looks like. We had good friends, and so it became appealing to us. What happened was, and I'm just going to go through the details. It was September of 2019, and we were in the middle of a horrendous conflict with my family. September of 2019, Shorey came to me one day. I was working at home, and she said, I think we should move to Ann Arbor. And I was like, okay. And so we started talking about moving to Ann Arbor. We met with a realtor to get a sense of the sale price of our home, to get a sense of the potential profit we could make. And I started tracking like what that profit would be, minus debts. We had about $40,000 in debts. And so we talked about Ann Arbor and then kind of decided, no, we shouldn't do Ann Arbor because my mom is there and we have this conflict with my mom. We looked at Grosse Pointe. Then we kind of set it aside. And then in January of 2020, we decided to move to Northern Michigan. And, but, the big concern that we always had jointly was education, because we had centered our children's lives around education in Los Angeles, always had. And we were concerned that we wouldn't be able to get a similar education in Northern Michigan. I also had very, very serious concerns about this conflict going on with my family. My mom was in Traverse City. It was with my mother, my brother, and my aunt primarily. My aunt owned my grandparents' cottage in Bel Air. My mom was in Traverse City, and I said to her one day, I feel like I'm walking into an emotional buzzsaw if I move to Traverse City. But we pursued it. And then I will say that when the pandemic started, that was, I would say, I can say with probably like 90% certainty, I don't think we would have moved if COVID hadn't happened. Because, the economy imploded, and frankly, we were worried that we were going to lose our house. And like the money in the house was like my dead father's life insurance money. And it was like, well, we can either stay here and, we don't know what's going to happen with the economy, or sell our house and have basically $500,000 and, an opportunity to have security. We applied for the kids to go to Pathfinder. They got into Pathfinder. Then Shorey saw this house on Zillow, and I contacted John Watkins, a realtor I'd been in touch with, and we scheduled a weekend. And I was like, my financial plan with moving to Michigan, particularly when we're talking about it in the fall, was like, okay, we're going to have somewhere around $450,000, $500,000. I wanted to buy a house. We looked at houses in Ann Arbor for like $450,000. I wanted to put like $200,000 into a house, have a mortgage of less than $2,000, have another $200,000 like saved that we could put towards the children's college education, or buy a property in Northern Michigan. I did want to focus on writing. So we see this house, it's $450,000 in Lake Leelanau. And I remember the weekend before, we scheduled a Zoom tour the weekend before, I said to Shorey, like, I don't, we're living in all this financial stress right now. I don't want to go back into that. You sure you want to do this? And she's like, no, let's look at it. So then we did the Zoom tour, and we got on, and I was just not, I was not interested. Like it was a huge fixer-upper. And we sat down afterwards, and Shorey said, well, we put all our money into this house here, and it was protected. And if we put our money into the house there, then it would be protected then. And I said, I don't want to spend the next 2 years remodeling a house. I said, I want to focus on writing. And she said to me, I don't want to hear about your writing anymore. And we put in an offer, I flew to see the house. This was the weekend after Memorial Day. So middle of COVID, it was the weekend, the first weekend. I don't know if you remember the George Floyd protests were going on everywhere. Like it was chaos. When I flew, I got like the last ticket I could get before they backed out. Or they I can't remember what they said. Or they weren't gonna. We asked for all the property. They said they weren't gonna. All 17 acres. They said they weren't gonna. I got home and I said, we pulled the offer. And, I swear I said, I can't stop thinking about the house. And she called John Watkins and she said, can we put another offer? And I said, fine. I said, okay. Our house was in escrow and it was like a Sunday afternoon and and we were driving to the bank to wire the money to pay cash. When we sold our house here, I had a check in my hand, in my name on June 18th of 2020 for $523,000. And I took it to City National Bank and I opened a bank account that has been discussed today. And, a few weeks later, we were driving to the bank to wire the money to buy the house. And I said to Aishwarya, I don't feel good about this. So this is the fourth feel good about this house. And she said, no, we're going to own a house in Northern Michigan. And we bought the house. And I remember, I don't want to get into too many details, but I remember the day we were leaving Pasadena, my attorney, we were doing this whole like land survey thing, and my realtor sent us a survey, and there was a triangle in the land survey, and it said John and Ida B. Stanton headstone. And I texted my realtor and I said, are there bodies buried on this property? And he said, yes, finding out more. That is how this began. We got on a plane that night. We took a red eye. We got to Traverse City. I would say from the moment, for me, we got in the car at the airport at Traverse City, I knew we made a mistake. We got to the property. I knew we made a mistake. Generally, Aishwarya and I had been in agreement that moving from Pasadena was a mistake. It was total chaos in the house. It was gross. It was disgusting. I spent days on my hands and knees cleaning it. We couldn't get our stuff moved in. Like, it was awful. Aishwarya wanted to demo the kitchen because she couldn't even stand being in it. She never saw the house. She bought it sight unseen. The whole financial plan that I had of $200,000 into a $450,000, $500,000 house, I wanted to pay off our debts. We didn't pay off our debts. I wanted to buy a new car for cash, like $30,000. That didn't happen. And it was just chaos. And I remember it was like August of 2020. So it was 4 or 6 weeks after we moved there. And it was a Saturday, and Aishwarya basically said she didn't want to be married to me anymore. And that's how moving to Northern Michigan transpired and began.
Okay. When you say the Lake Leelanau home was unlivable, did you meet with someone to find out about what would be needed to be done to make it up to your standards?
So, the other thing I want to say is, I talked about when I mentioned North Carolina. I was always interested in moving to North Carolina. She didn't want to do that. I think the reason that we came to an agreement is it seemed like I wanted to send the kids to public school. I had wanted to move to Michigan for years, move out of Los Angeles. I was kind of indecisive, but it was if this is what we can agree on, this is what we're going to do. There was this idea that we won't have a mortgage and you can focus on writing and blah, and that was an idea. But pretty much upon arriving in the house, we knew we couldn't live in it. We had inspections, but as far as, so once we did the demo, it became very clear that we needed to take out, we needed to remodel the house. There was an original house that had been modified, and the addition was just terrible. It was gross. There was, and the demo was the walls were pulled out of the kitchen. Aishwarya's we hooked up a stove, we put in a laundry tub for a sink. They tore open the roof because the chimney was leaking. It was a disaster. They demoed, the guest house. They demoed 3 bathrooms. And so we met with several architects, 2 we didn't like, and then we met with this guy, Peter Smith, who was actually from Ann Arbor, who was with Design Smith. And, again, going back to Pasadena, so we bought the house. It was $1,025,000. I think we put down $350,000, and my mortgage was $650,000. And I had an FHA loan, and it was like $4,300 a month. And so I didn't want to have a mortgage of $600,000 plus. Again, that was the whole reason I moved. So we've put $450,000 cash into the house. We meet with Peter Smith, and we liked him, and he had a vision for the property. And he's like, you know, this is $1 million property, and here's my vision for the remodel. And we said, well, how much would that be? And he's like, $600,000 to $700,000. That was in like early October. So again, you know, I had this whole, like, we talked about our financial life improving, but within, you know, 3 months, it was basically going to be back the same. And I didn't like the house. I never felt good about moving to Leland. I didn't think it was right for our kids. And so I was not motivated to, you know, do a $600,000 to $700,000 remodel on the house. But we hired them. They were doing designs. It was supposed to take 6 to 8 weeks. You know, I will say also, like, I was freelancing, and then this company that they offered me a full-time job that I wasn't really interested in taking freelancing, and I had to decide about taking it. And I remember it was like a Monday, and Aishwarya and I had talked about it, and she was tired of hearing about my work, which I understand. And I remember thinking, if the spring comes and we need to get a mortgage or get this construction loan, and I can't do it because I don't have a full-time job or there's an issue with my income, Aishwarya is going to be furious with me. And so I took this full-time job because I was afraid of her getting angry at me not being able to get a loan to remodel the house. You know, they were supposed to take 6 to 8 weeks, which would have been by the end of 2021. They didn't finish till March. You know, it was $12,000. My income paid for $8,000 of it. And by the time we got the designs, like, our marriage was not going well. I was, you know, having a difficult time. I didn't want to live in Leland. I didn't really want to be in the house, live in the house. We got bids on the work, and it was $1 million. And people were like, my therapist, we had friends who said, your marriage is not in a place to remodel a house. Don't do it. So we decided not to, and then we were going to tear the house down. We made this plan to tear the house down, and, you know, and then we obviously didn't tear the house down.
Okay. Did you share with Aishwarya that you were unhappy in Leland?
Yeah. I mean,
did Aishwarya acknowledge that you were unhappy in Leland? Did Aishwarya acknowledge to you that?
Yeah, I mean, we, you know, like, we fought a lot, you know, and I've apologized. Like I have said, I had no, you know, we read through the emails. Like, my emotions that year were out of control. Like, but I also say, I think anybody going through what I went through, like, I had gone from, our life in Pasadena was expensive. The kids were doing amazing. I go through pictures on my phone, and the kids are like glowing smiles. Our children were happy, thriving children in Pasadena. And, you know, I was like, okay, we're going to sell the house, but it's like, let's have this plan. The plan wasn't carried out. Like nothing that I had envisioned was happening. And now we're living in this house that is like driving me crazy because it's just like unlivable. Aishwarya doesn't want to be married to me. We're fighting all the time. My family of origin basically liked me. I'm struggling with my career, and it was working, and then all of a sudden we're in Leland, and it's like, it didn't make any sense to me. I didn't understand, like, the education wasn't good, like, the house was a disaster, like, and Aishwarya was like, kind of like, this is what I want to do. Although we fought, but there were times where she said she wanted to move back to Los Angeles. Like, I remember, like, we got these baby chickens, and they died within hours of getting there. And then I think the next day she hit a squirrel in the road, and she texted me and was like, I want to move back to Los Angeles. So no, I made it clear, and going well. Like, we talked about me in the spring of 2021 going to LA to kind of get a break. I didn't do that. And then I remember we took a family trip to North Carolina, which I loved being in Winston-Salem, we teaching a class, this College for Kids class at Northern Michigan Community College. And I was driving down there, and I remembered it was my dad's birthday. And he's buried on Old Mission Peninsula Township Cemetery out near Tawanta. Is that how you pronounce it? Is that right?
Yeah.
I pronounce it? Yeah. And I was like, I need to go to his grave. And so I'm driving out Old Mission where my mom lives, and it was just this, I was like, it was traumatizing and upsetting. And I go to his grave, and I'm literally standing at my father's grave, afraid that my mother's going to show up because I cut off contact with her 5 months earlier. And I didn't tell Aishwarya because she said, stop talking about your family so much. I came home, I told her that afternoon. And I remember the next day, it was June 29th. She said, you can't live here.
How did you handle that separation? Where did you go? Did you leave the home? Where did you go?
Go there, see if you want to live there, get a break. I'd actually mentioned to her, like, maybe I should rent an apartment in Angeles for the next year and fly back and forth to, like, and that really upset her because she was like, why, like, she felt like I was abandoning my family. And I was like, okay. And she contacted our friends, the Yurchaks, who are like our oldest friends here in Los Angeles. They were our first neighbors. And every year they go to Vermont usually. And Molly Yurchak said they're going to Vermont for 3 weeks, and they have chickens and bunnies and dogs and cats and this sort of urban farm, and they needed somebody to house sit. And they said I could stay there for 3.5 weeks. Arguing, I flew to Pasadena on July 19th. And I was planning to be there 3 weeks. And so they flew out on July 29th. And so that's where we were. Yeah.
Okay. And then the infamous August 1st thing happened. What was it on August 1st?
Yeah, August 1st, 2021.
And that's when you got the email from Aishwarya, and that's previously been entered, but it's where she got that email.
I was in complete shock.
Okay.
I was at John Muir High School. It was a Sunday morning with Josephine and Leo. It's the high school in our old neighborhood. We were running at the track. I got a text from her, and she said, I sent you an email. You need to read this in private. I just warmed up, and I stood under the bleachers, and I read that email, and I said, let's talk on the phone today. So we talked on the phone that afternoon. The kids were at a friend's house, and I said, okay, how are you planning to pay for this? She said, I don't know. I said, well, do you have plans about where we're going to live, or what we're going to do about the house? And she said, I hadn't really thought about that. And then she told me that she'd wanted to kill herself every day for the past year. And she told me that she had been thinking about drowning herself in Lake Leelanau, but it was too cold. It would be too cold, and she didn't want to do that to our children. That was very alarming to me because she'd had a very serious suicidal episode in 2013. The following day, we kind of calmed down. We talked through it, and we texted later that day. And the next day she texted me, sent me a text saying she had a friend.
I need to re-rack that. I'm sorry if there's lagging, guys. The streaming is not good tonight. I apologize. It's Friday night. It's busy. I'm turning off my camera to try and help, but did he just say, is that what he just said? We have like 4 minutes left and then we're done, guys. So let's make it happen. I promise.
By her saying she wanted to kill. So I was birthday, which she texted a suicidal episode in 2013. The following day, we kind of calmed down. We talked through it, and we texted later that day. And the next day she texted me, sent me a text saying she had a friend take my shotgun that she bought me for my 40th birthday out of our house because she wanted to shoot my mother for her birthday, which was on August 4th. So I was very alarmed by the divorce filing, by her saying she wanted to kill herself, by her saying she wanted to kill my mother. And I spoke to my therapist, and he said, you need to get an attorney. Contacted friend's sister-in-law, who referred me to Melissa Humelis. She had also said she wanted to mediate it with a firm in Ann Arbor. So the day after she filed, I contacted this firm in Ann Arbor, and they're like, we can't help you with a divorce. We're in Washtenaw County. You need somebody in Northern Michigan. Okay. contacted Melissa Umulis, and we spoke on Thursday, August 5th. And prior to that, I said, I'm really worried about her mental health. For the reasons I just said, and I said she's been hospitalized twice for mental health. We get on the phone and Melissa says, I don't see a divorce filing. And I said, okay. And said, well, she has this receipt from LegalZoom. So I forwarded that email. And Melissa read it and she said, does this read like a suicide note to you? And I said, I don't necessarily read it that way, but I can see how it can be interpreted that way. And she said, where are your kids? And I said, Josephine and Leo are here with me, and Bertie's in Michigan, which I seek mental health treatment in an emergency facility. She also said, you can also file for an emergency custody order.
Object as to hearsay. Whatever Attorney Umulis told him, which is also a violation of his attorney-client privilege. I don't know if he intends to waive it, but it's certainly hearsay.
Yeah.
Okay, well.
Just tell us your response to that.
Anyways,
and then we'll end there.
Okay, so I spoke to an attorney and I reserved an Airbnb. I got a hotel room and I changed my flights. I had to leave, like 4 days early. I had to contact Molly, find somebody else to watch the house.